Hi, everybody. It's Joe again. Oh, good to see you, Kay. Hi, Steve. Hi, Rick. Hey, Rick, what's this ha about? Hi, Cheyenne. Hi, Dolores. Steve, hello to you too. Okay, and Evelina, nice to see you. Okay, so please share this as much as you can, of course. Goes without saying. I appreciate all the sharing that you've been doing, okay, of late. Um, I think our channel has been growing somewhat, and that is good to see. Hi, Susan. How are you? Thank you for coming. Okay, today a corruption controversy erupted. I think the controversy was kind of kicked off. Was kicked off by Zephyr Teachout's op-ed. Susan just asked me, "Hey Joe, did I read Zephyr's op-ed?" Yes, I did read it, and I think I have it up on my screen, and I can't, unless it's disappeared in the last half hour. The title of it, okay, well, first of all, it was published. Okay, the title of it is Middle Class Joe Biden. Let me shift my view here. I'll get started quickly with it. So it was kicked off, I think, by this article. Title of it, okay, is Middle Class Joe Biden has a corruption problem. It makes him a weak candidate. Inspires Zephyr Teachout, who has run for the Attorney General of New York State unsuccessfully, and run for the Governor of New York State unsuccessfully. She's a law professor, okay, at Fordham University. She's very bright. She's very good, very honest, and very concerned with cleaning up the government and getting corruption out of the government. That's been a historic concern of hers in her career. Uh, so, okay, the date on this article was yesterday, but January 2020. So it wasn't actually today. Here's a picture of Joe Biden speaking during a campaign event at Simpson College in Iowa on Saturday. Let's go through the article and see what's it about. So, of course, Donald Trump is really corrupt. We all know this. And behind the specific issues like domestic emoluments and foreign emoluments, okay, and the Ukraine issue, and his profiting from his hotels, and his making his family rich, okay, and all of this stuff. His appointments, okay, of people to various high level offices. The whole thing has been governed by corruption, unprecedented corruption in the executive branch, and open for all to see, and almost a challenge to all the rest of us. We'll do something about it. So here come the Democrats who pledged resistance in 2016. and they're trying to choose a candidate to beat Donald Trump. And of course, Joe Biden, who is a moderate white man, according to Zephyr Teachout. Though I'm not sure what he's moderate about, but he's often characterized that way as moderate, who labels himself, okay, as middle class Joe, quote unquote, makes sense. But Biden has a big corruption problem, and it makes him weak. And Zephyr says, I know it seems crazy, but a lot of the voters we need, independents and people who might stay home, would look at Biden and Trump and say, quote, they're all dirty. Now, how do we know this? Well, first of all, it's common sense. But second of all, we know how cynical people are about our politics in this country. They've been cynical for a very long time, and they automatically think when they encounter a politician that that politician is likely to be dirty. So they hardly have to be convinced because they approach politicians with the orientation that, well, they're dirty, you know. So, uh, since they suspect politicians are dirty anyway, and since they have reason to suspect that Joe Biden, okay, is dirty, that means the orientation of a campaign centered around Joe Biden, okay, is going to be, uh, it's really going to be a negative campaign, and it's going to focus on where Trump is dirty and where Biden, okay, is dirty. Okay, and the people will be somewhere in the middle, and they're going to be inclined to throw up their hands and say, they're all dirty. My vote doesn't really matter anyway because I'm going to get a dirty politician, and that's all there is to it. And they give up on the campaign, and we have low turnout, okay, in voting. And of course, if there's low turnout in voting, then it's going to mean that we'll have the kind of Congress we have now, okay, as an outcome, and we'll probably have the return of Donald Trump back to the presidency. Because people will, of course, think it really doesn't matter. And we don't have any change here. Okay, the Democrats are not putting forward any change. It's just replacing one crook but for another crook. Zephyr Teachout says it looks like Joe Biden, the middle class Joe, has perfected the art of taking big contributions and then representing his corporate donors at the cost of middle and working class Americans. Converting campaign contributions into legislative favors and the policy positions isn't being moderate, quote unquote. It's the kind of transactional politics that Americans have come to loathe. And she says there are three clear examples. First, Joe Biden's support for working class Americans. His career was bankrolled by the credit card industry. Yeah, he's a senator from Delaware. So, yeah, his career will have been bankrolled by the credit card industry. He delivered for it by spearheading a bankruptcy bill that made it harder for Americans to reduce their debts and helped to cause the financial crisis. Yes, in particular, it makes it harder for us to get rid of any credit card debt that we might have, whatever our financial condition. The article goes on. He not only authored and voted for that bill, he split with Barack Obama and led the battle to vote down Democratic amendments. And this was, of course, in 2005 and 2006. His explanations for carrying water for the credit card industry have changed over time. They have never rung true. The simplest explanation is the most likely. He did it for his donors. At a fundraiser last year, Biden promised his Wall Street donors that nothing would fundamentally change for them if he became president. Now, the financial world is raising huge money for his campaign. And quote again, it clearly thinks he's going to be its friend if elected. However, most Americans who are ripped off by the financial sector every day aren't looking for a candidate who has made their life harder. Now, to digress from this issue of corruption with respect to the financial industry, Joe Biden, of course, is also the candidate who, in passing the crime bill in the middle of the 90s, also made life harder for a very big segment of the population, because the crime bill resulted in sending thousands and thousands of people to jail who would never have gone there. So that was also another area where he made life harder for working class and middle class people. Now, moving on. Second is healthcare. As Zephyr says, on 25th of April, the day he announced his campaign, Biden went straight to a fundraiser co-hosted by the chief executive of a major health insurance corporation. He refused to sign a pledge to reject money from insurance and pharma execs, that is, health insurance and pharma execs, and he continues to raise money from healthcare industry donors. His campaign is being bankrolled by a super PAC run by healthcare lobbyists. What did all these donors get? So far, a healthcare proposal from Biden that will preserve the power of the insurance industry and leaves 10 million Americans uninsured if this bill actually is passed. Now, 10 million uninsured Americans is equal to something like 12,000 American fatalities per year. That's what it means when it comes to fatalities. It also means we'll probably still have 125,000 bankruptcies per year and hundreds of thousands of divorces and mortgage foreclosures per year. okay, as well. In other words, it doesn't solve the health insurance slash healthcare problems that we have now. But that's what these donors would be getting. Third, Zephyr points out climate change, or as I like to say, the climate emergency. Biden signed a pledge not to take money from the fossil fuel industry. Then he broke his promise. Right after a CNN town hall on climate change, he held a fundraiser hosted by the founder of a fossil fuel conglomerate. He's pushing climate policy that has gotten dismal views from leading environmental groups. Nice for him, huh? So we've already covered the climate emergency, where his corruption will most probably prevent us doing anything serious about that particular problem. We've talked about healthcare, which will prevent us from totally solving the health insurance healthcare problem. And his roots in the financial world, which will probably mean that we won't get any debt relief if we elect Joe Biden. But it's not only that, it's also the corruption. It's also that if we allow Joe Biden to get in as the nominee, then the Democratic Party can't run a corruption campaign against Donald Trump and the Republicans, because they're going to have to shield Joe Biden from all the charges that Trump is going to level against him. And Zephyr also says there are plenty of other examples that raise questions, like housing and Social Security. There are big there are mobiles in the real estate industry playing a major role in Biden's campaign. Unlike his rivals, he has no comprehensive housing plan. So, he's not going to help us solve the housing problem. We already know that, because he has those donors and he has no plan to do it. And a big question arises. When Joe Biden pushed for cuts to Social Security all these years, was he serving his donors or his constituents? How about his Wall Street donors who've been trying to privatize Social Security for years and years and years? Joe Biden also has strong ties to the Peter G. Peterson faux fiscal responsibility forces in the D.C. area. This is not something mentioned by Zephyr here, but I will mention it. He's been close to these people for years and years and years. The same people Nancy Pelosi is close to. And Biden and Nancy Pelosi also share a very important opinion. And that is that PAYGO is very important to keep around. So Zephyr says, I can already hear the hows. But look at Trump. Trump is 1,000 times worse. So Zephyr says, you don't need to convince me. I have spent my life writing about and fighting against corruption. And in America, I've never seen anything like the current administration. In the last 3 years, I have made combating Trump's corruption the heart of my work. And you know what? Zephyr would like the heart of her work to become very important in this upcoming campaign. And corruption is one of the very central issues of American politics. That's what getting money out of politics is about. It's about ending corruption. Anyway, Zephyr goes on. I was on the first lawsuit against him for corrupt constitutional violations, and I ran for Attorney General in New York on a platform pointing out just how dangerous he is and how important unused state laws are to stopping him. My work on corruption was cited in the House Judiciary Committee's report on impeachment. But here's the thing. Nominating a candidate like Biden, she says, will make it far more difficult to defeat Trump. Yes, of course. It's going to allow him to muddy the water, to once again pretend he is the one, quote, draining the swamp, quote unquote. Trump and the Cambridge Analytica of 2020 will campaign as they did in 2016 on a message of radical about nihilism. Everybody lies. Everybody is corrupt. Nothing matters. There is no truth. And boy, she is so right about that. And it's expressed in such a simple and powerful way. He ran like that in 2016. He ran successfully in large part because a lot of Democrats hated the corruption of the Clintons, and they ended up staying home. They ended up staying home. They had no capacity to mobilize any independents, whatever, in that campaign. That's another reason why they lost. She points out politicians who are corrupt always use whataboutism. Like, oh, what about that over there? Trump will say, okay, in defense. And what about that over there? And look over there. And look at that guy under the tree. With Biden, we're basically handling Trump a whataboutism playbook, says Zephyr Teachout. She says the comparison won't be fair, but if you think he won't use Biden's closeness to donors as a cudgel to try to keep people home, you haven't been paying attention. No, you haven't been. That kind of thing's been going on for years. Unlike Democrats, who must give voters a reason to come out, Trump doesn't need voters to love him. He just needs to convince people the whole game is ugly. So, to add something to what Zephyr just said, the whole game, okay, is ugly. So, it doesn't matter whether you vote him out or not. So you want to stay home, sleep late, maybe not get out of bed? Yeah, maybe don't bother to register because it's all so ugly. Well, go ahead. It's not going to make any difference because Biden is just as bad as Trump. It won't make any difference that Biden isn't just as bad as Trump. Trump will say, see Joe, see middle class Joe, see lunch pail Joe. See, Lion Joe? You really want to vote for Lion Joe? Whether or not Biden is making choices to please his donors, there's no doubt his record represents the transactional, grossly corrupt culture in Washington that long precedes Trump. We cannot allow, she says, Trump to so lower our standards that we aren't even allowed to call out that culture, which has not only stymied progress but also harmed the Democratic Party. The good news is that we still have time to break with this culture of corruption. We don't have to choose Biden's way, which would give Trump a perfect foil. The 2020 election should be about a crystal clear contrast between truth and lies, corruption and integrity, compassion and cruelty. And she concludes, we have a rare opportunity to end a larger culture of corruption, and we should take it. We will regret it if we don't. So, Joe Biden started screaming like a stuck pig. This next article appeared in Common Dreams today. While establishment erupts over anti-corruption expert pointing out Biden's troubling record. The progressives say, look at the troubling record. This article was written by Owen Higgins, a staff writer at Common Dreams, as you should know by now, since I often talk about his articles. The establishment Democrats exploded over a column making the argument that former Vice President Joe Biden is too corrupt to credibly present an alternative to Donald Trump in the 2020 general election. And the reaction of the progressives was to present even more evidence from Biden's past that makes the case against his candidacy. And the article points out that Zephyr Teachout's column set off a firestorm. And it goes over Zephyr's 3 areas of concern: the financial industry, overworking Americans, his ties to the healthcare industry, and his connections to the fossil fuel industry. And of course, she called out the potential for Trump to use Joe Biden's record against him in the general. And Jen Guyger commented on this, saying on Twitter that the argument against Biden for corruption was an easy one to make. And Jen said, of course he's corrupt. He takes millions in campaign contributions and votes with his donors. It's obvious. And establishment Democrats and members of the media cried foul over the piece, calling it an attack and placing the blame for it at Bernie Sanders' feet. Crystal Ball replied by noting the double standard in which it is off the table for Sanders and his team to mark a legitimate distinction between the senator and other candidates while his rivals are allowed to levy unfounded attacks against him. Quote, so the Sanders campaign isn't allowed to point things out that are objectively true, while other campaigns are celebrated for nasty invented smears. Unquote. Crystal Ball tweeted this in reply to an attack on the campaign from Paul Krugman of the New York Times. And she said, got it. And she, of course, was dead on. She was right about that. There is a double standard. Unfortunately, Bernie responded to the double standard and specifically to Biden's call for Bernie to silence his supporters. Bernie responded to that with an apology, a relatively weak apology, but nevertheless an apology pointing out that his instructions to his campaign are that his people are to stay positive, or words to that effect. And Biden, of course, while not questioning any of the facts here, he said he thought that the Bernie campaign was being unfair in calling him out for corruption. And while he made this charge, he refused to refute or face the corruption charges from campaign supporters such as Zephyr Teachout. John Schwartz, who's a writer for The Intercept, said that Krugman's distaste for the attacks was based in his support for Biden and not in a real interest in keeping the primary fair. And Schwartz said, note, Krugman doesn't say anything here is false and is not actually denying that Biden is corrupt, said Schwartz. And he said, Krugman surely knows Biden is corrupt, although in the standard Washington way, not in the insane and lurid Trump way. Krugman just objects to anyone mentioning these facts. Well, specifically, he was objecting to anyone supporting the Sanders campaign in relation to mentioning these facts. Sanders disavowed Zephyr Teachout's article and claimed not to believe that Biden is corrupt in an interview with CBS News. Bernie Sanders should go and hang his head in shame right now. And you know, I say this as someone who loves Bernie, absolutely loves Bernie. But there is a time to draw a line. Zephyr Teachout's article was purely factual. Corruption is an issue in this campaign. It is an issue relative to Trump. And it is an issue relative to who should get the nomination of the Democratic Party to run against Trump. Because the Democratic Party cannot possibly win that election if it can't talk effectively about the corruption of Trump, because its nominee has to defend himself against corruption charges from Trump. That is one thing that Bernie does not have to do. Bernie is the cleanest candidate in this campaign. That has to be a strength of his, not only against Trump, but against other Democrats who are running against him. And I am sorry, the people taking big money from the donors, including Biden, okay, and Buttigieg, and some of the other candidates as well, they are corrupt. You cannot take that much money and remain uncorrupted. You cannot pander to the donors in fundraisers all the time and not do what the donors want you to do. That cannot happen. Biden tweeted in response, "Thanks for acknowledging this, Bernie," quote unquote. "These kinds of attacks have no place in this primary. Let's all keep our focus on making Donald Trump a one-term president." Yes, let's all keep our focus on that. And Joe Biden, your corruption is relevant to that, because the only way we're going to be able to defeat Trump is by running a candidate that has no stench of corruption around that candidate. We need that. Corruption is an issue. You are not subjected to a personal attack by Zephyr Teachout. You were subjected to a factual criticism. You were subjected to an obvious charge, which Donald Trump would deliver 100 times worse, magnifying it, stretching it from here to the moon, making it impossible for you to bring the corruption issues which so damaged Trump to the campaign. That is the truth, Joe Biden. Go home and eat some ice cream. You're unfit to be the president of the United States. You're too corrupt. And no, Bernie, I'm not going to shut up about that. Giving Biden the ability to pivot away from discussing that history and calling for ignoring it altogether, said Mehdi Hassan, who's a journalist for The Intercept, is a problem. And Mehdi is completely and entirely on the mark here. It's a problem. It's not only a problem, it's the kiss of death in the campaign. A quote from Mehdi: "It is political malpractice that none of his rivals have brought up Biden's sponsorship of the infamous bankruptcy bill on behalf of the credit card industry in Delaware at a single TV debate so far," Hassan said. Quote again, "which allows Biden to then put out tweets like about this one." Exactly. Mehdi is completely correct. When Biden was fighting for the bankruptcy bill, one of the senators was fighting against the credit card industry. And he threw up his hands in disgust and was quoted by the press as saying, the banks run the place around here. That senator was Dick Durbin, the senior senator, okay, from Illinois, and one of the strongest backers of Obama when he was running for the presidency. The second leading candidate for majority leader of the Senate when Harry Reid had left. The second leading candidate was Dick Durbin. He has that amount of influence in the Senate in terms of the Democrats. But Durbin had to throw up his hands and say, the banks run the place around here. Thanks in great part to Joe Biden and his corruption. And journalist Sam Adler-Bell noted the possibility of the GOP taking advantage of a gaping hole in Biden's credibility with voters. How many ads have to appear from the Donald Trump camp to make it clear, if Biden is the nominee, that he has a credibility gap? 1, 2, 3, maybe 2 weeks of ads flooding the networks, putting the stamp of corruption on Joe Biden. Trump would love to have Biden as the nominee. Love to have him as the nominee. As a number of the progressives have pointed out, Biden's history, at the very least, hints at corruption and also nepotism of the kind already described by Teachout and used by Republicans to defend Trump from impeachment over withholding aid to Ukraine until the country's leaders announced an investigation into Biden's son Hunter's employment by Burisma. And Matt Bruenig basically tweeted that. And he ended his tweet saying, so everyone needs to keep the lips zipped on Biden corruption for the moment. And then Matt says, this is the amusing corner the Dems have walked themselves into. Yeah, Nancy Pelosi has walked the Dems into it by limiting impeachment but to the Ukrainian issue. If she had impeached Trump on the 12 grounds that I outlined in a previous stream, we wouldn't be worried about Joe Biden's corruption now. It won't even be a possibility that we'd be nominating him. Nancy Pelosi has been greasing the skids for the nomination of Joe Biden, shielding him and protecting him. Not just by getting 3 other senators off the campaign, but also by narrowing the corruption concern to the Ukraine issue, where Trump will be able to attack the Democrats and Biden for the corruption of Biden and his son, or at least the appearance of corruption of Biden and his son. And there's a quote here from the sainted Mr. Brokaw, that is MSNBC's sainted correspondent, who they look at as some kind of demigod. And so Brokaw said in 2008, quote, "Your son was working for the credit card company at the same time. In retrospect, wasn't it inappropriate?" Unquote. This came up in the context of Brokaw quizzing Biden on the work he did for the MBNA Bank in the Senate when Hunter was on their payroll. That was tweeted by Ryan Grim on January 21st, 2020. And this article from Communist Dream says, to be clear, at Zephyr Teachout is an expert on corruption, and the substance of her article is correct. People are outraged that she called Joe Biden corrupt, and yet no one has even attempted to refute what the article actually says because it's verifiably correct. That was tweeted by @AxComrade, but specifically Cabral, on January 21st of 2020. And also Nathan J. Robinson, who's the editor of Current Affairs, said that the time to air out the National Frontrunner's record is now. Quote, "If we don't point out the truth, we risk getting stuck with a corrupt candidate that Trump will crush," Robinson said. And of course, Teachout in her column on Monday called on Democrats to choose another path, the path of ending the corruption culture in Washington. How many times has Bernie talked against this culture? How many times has he talked about ending this culture? The culture that feeds the oligarchy and makes them so powerful. How many times has he talked against that? And yet, when it comes time to campaign against that, he decides that he doesn't want to do that in the primary. He doesn't want to do that in the primary. That he doesn't want his campaign to do it. He doesn't want his campaign supporters to do it. I think that is really too bad. I think Bernie has to be tougher. I think he has to be upbeat, as he usually is. But I think, above all, he has to be honest. Runs by Buttigieg and Biden and nearly everybody else in the campaign, nearly all the other people in the campaign, would be disasters because almost everyone else, except for Bernie, have sold out to their donors. Now, I'm not prepared to make that case for Warren yet. And I think that Tulsi is the exception to this particular rule. But damn, all the other Democrats who have been running and who have a chance have these skeletons in their closets because they accepted the corruption of Washington as normal. One of the major things that distinguishes Bernie Sanders from the others is that he is free from corruption of this kind. He needs to point that out in this campaign. And he needs to contrast his record with the record of others in this respect. So that's my take for tonight. Please share, like, and subscribe when this goes up on YouTube. And please share and like it on Facebook. And please become a patron at www.patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. Thank you. I will now turn to your comments. Zephyr asked me if I read, I'm sorry, Susan asked me if I read Zephyr's piece. Yep, I read Zephyr's piece. Guess what? I read Zephyr's piece. No question about it. I read Zephyr's piece. Excuse me a minute while I scroll back to the beginning so I can consider your comments. And Rick Maynard said, actually giving birth to a small Trump on the phone? Krugman kicked it off with a counter op-ed attacking Bernie and Zephyr. Yeah, I know. Krugman is so dishonest. I know he's dishonest. He's really dishonest. Bonnie joined. Hi, honey. And Kay said, you guys are among the few that are ever glad to see me, laugh out loud. Too many Hillbots on my page, laugh out loud. Steve says, of course we're glad to see you. Kay says, glad to see and chat with all of you too, Steve. Steve says, Trump would slaughter Joe. Yep. And Rick Maynard says, Krugman's back and on his computer. Elizabeth Harding joined, and Kay said, also very much more expensive to go bankrupt now. It's more expensive. It takes longer. A lot of times you're stuck with Chapter 13 instead of a clean Chapter 7. And, of course, it's horribly hard to get out of the credit card debt. Rick said, David Sirota's been going wild, finding old videos on Biden's votes, and also positions on topics. Yeah, I know he has. He's done a great job. Kay says, I've seen some of those, Rick. Don Adams has joined, and Steve Wolfbrand says, Bernie should not have apologized for this. It's all true. Of course he shouldn't have apologized. He should have doubled down on it. And he should have said, look, Joe, that's one of the contrasts between you and me. I'm sorry, but that's a matter of record. All this is a matter of record. Zephyr Teachout is unimpeachable. You, on the other hand, might very well be impeachable. So go home and eat ice cream, Joe. And Kay says, Biden went from the poor people's town hall to his banker buddies when he told them nothing would change under him. She said, that says it all to me. Oh, also, when he began to run out of money in the campaign, he turned to a super PAC to support his campaign so he would have the money to continue because Sanders and Warren and Buttigieg were outdistancing him in the race for contributions. And Rick says, can't share the pictures here. I'm going to put it in pin chat. Okay, Rick. And Rick says, Kay put in pin chat. Steve says, I love Zephyr. Yeah, me too, Steve. Zephyr's great. She should be part of Bernie's administration. Hell, maybe she should be the Attorney General. Forget being the Attorney General of New York. She'd make a great Attorney General of the United States. You want, an honest Attorney General? Zephyr Teachout is the one. Kay says, me too, Steve. Kay says, look at that guy behind the curtain. Laugh out loud, SMH. Cheyenne says, gotta go. Cheyenne says, in lots of pain, gotta go. Sorry, Cheyenne, I hope you feel better. I hope you feel better. Take care of yourself. Steve says, Trump will crucify Biden over Hunter. He'll crucify him over Hunter, but he'll also crucify him over a lot of other things too. He's got a long corruption record. Stephen K say, take care, Cheyenne, and hope you feel better. Kay says, if Biden gets a nomination, Trump will win again. I really think if any of the others should get it, then Trump, will win again. Well, if Tulsi had the support of the Democratic Party, she might be able to beat Trump. But I think she's the only other candidate who can possibly match up against Trump. And by the way, I don't think she'll be as strong a candidate, as Bernie, because Bernie has the movement, in back of him. And there's no way to discount that. Rick says, tweet I copied. When a corruption expert says a politician is corrupt, you better take her word for it. But then the issue, in what way is she an expert? Easy to call someone, an expert. In her case, though, she really is an expert. She's been studying it for years and years and years. But that expert is way overused in our politics. I mean, everybody's an expert all of a sudden. And McMaynard gives a link to an article in Business Insider dealing with the Bernie Sanders and Hillary issue today. Bernie Sanders said, "On a good day, my wife likes me," in response to Hillary Clinton's statement that nobody likes him. Article I think about. Well, I'm certainly ready to believe that the plutocrats that Hillary Clinton knows don't like Bernie. I'm ready to believe that. On the other hand, I don't think that Hillary knows me, and I don't think that Hillary knows any of the people who are watching this particular live stream. And we love Bernie. We love Bernie. And Bernie's got millions of people who love him, millions of people who donate to him, and millions of people who volunteer for his campaign. And we like him just fine. Kay says, I heard that too, Rick. Laugh out loud. Kay says, I don't think many people know that Delaware is run by corporations and is so corrupt as a state. I think many people do know that, actually. I can't say how many people. I never took a survey. But Steve Gonzo has joined, and Steve Wolfbrand said, I had no idea. Kay says, most people don't bother, don't hear much about the state of Delaware in the news, do you? And Kay says, Pelosi needs to go ASAP. Well, this time in 2020, there's no way the progressives can vote for her for Speaker again. They have to vote to a person against her. The whole bloc, the whole caucus. Russ says, I'm not voting for Biden, period. Me neither. And Steve says, me neither. And Barbara Wernick has joined. Eric Bloom has joined. Hi, Eric. Hi, Barbara. Steve says, I understand that Bernie wants to stay on the high road. But hey, time to take the gloves off. Now, I don't think this is a question of taking the gloves off. Let's just be factual. Corruption is an issue in this campaign. And the fact is that Biden's record on corruption is terrible. In that respect, he's one of the worst of the candidates. One of the very worst of the candidates. In the front rank of corrupt candidates for the Democratic Party. He has been as guilty as anyone. That is a matter of record. Zephyr exposed his record in that short piece that she did for The Guardian. It's not even arguable. It is taking the high road to call out Joe Biden's corruption and to run the campaign based in part on the idea that the party cannot nominate a corrupt individual. That if they don't want a repeat of 2016, they cannot nominate an individual who was corrupt, who is unambiguously corrupt. Kay says, I actually doubt I will vote for any of them except Bernie. The BNMW is BS. If the DNC wants to lose again, then let them. I don't want to let them because unfortunately we lose then too. We need to get them to nominate the right person so we don't lose. It's not about them, it's about us. Jim Bird has joined. Rick says he's letting his surrogates take the heat. Susan said, why did he back down? But Evelina says, if Dems know they can't win with Biden, does that mean that they don't want to win? I think there's a lot of them who don't care if they win or not. Too many of them don't care if they win as long as their donors stay around and they stay around. I don't think they care if the party wins. Susan says they act, and Kay says, Evelina, if Sanders wins, they would lose lots of money. And Susan says they act as if Trump won't use Biden's past against him. Jim says Biden is putting fake polls in his commercials. Well, we'll just have to call him out for that. And Steve is saying some LA activists are heading out to Iowa this week to help with Bernie's campaign. But Jeremy White, Keith Anthony, Sikora, and others. That's wonderful. Kay says, I've been seeing those polls on the Hillbots posts too. Yeah, the Hillbots know all about the bot polls. And Rick said, was in reference to Zephyr. Michael Moore said, McKay says, okay, Michael Moore said that he was planning to go out there and work for Bernie too. Yeah, I think he kind of has been working for Bernie. I see. In Iowa, you mean? To work as a surrogate for Bernie in Iowa. Yeah, Michael Moore can be incredibly effective. Russ says, well, Hillary can't resist taking stabs at the Bernie crowd. She can't fathom just how horrible she is, was. Screw the PGPF by neoliberals. Exactly, Russell. Screw them. Jim Bird says, hello all. And Kay says, I agree, Joe. Not them, but us. Didn't work that way last time, did it? I held my nose and voted for Clinton, but I'm not going to do that again. That's great, Kay. And Dale Weaver has joined. Hi, Dale. Okay, any other comments or questions? I've caught up to your comments and questions tonight. If you have any others, please let me know. I thought it was incredible that Bernie apologized. That was bullshit. Steve says, Bernie's black. The surrogates have to get down to South Carolina ASAP. Dale says, hi, Doc. Hi, friends. And Rick says, night all. Take care, Joe. Yeah, night, Rick. I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully. I'll be back tomorrow. I think the surrogates are going to concentrate, okay, in Iowa for the time being and get that over with, and then go down to South Carolina and make a final push in South Carolina. They've already done a lot of work in South Carolina, but they'll make a final push for it. By the way, I've known for a long time that Krugman is intellectually dishonest. I mean, you can confront him with facts, and he just ignores them. Kay says, "What kind of wine are you drinking?" Laugh out loud. She says, "I'm drinking Bud Light. The wine I'm drinking is from Trader Joe's, and it's popularly known as $3 Chuck. And it's known that because it's been $3 or around $3, okay, forever. It increased some time ago to $3.29, but that's still pretty close to $3. But then some of the German supermarkets came into the area and they had wine for lower than $3. So Trader Joe's has now gone down to $2.99 again. Actually, their $3 Chuck is pretty good wine. We enjoy it. It's our normal table wine that we use when it's not a special occasion. It's the only wine we can afford. And Rick Maynard says, have big shows coming up this week and next week. Really pushing it. The New Hampshire primary is February 11th. Well, send links to the show, Rick, when they come up. So we know they're coming up. Anybody else? Kay says, I used to love sangria until they put sulfides in it. Gives me an instant headache now. I didn't know they put sulfides in it. Anyway, I don't know whether the hearts are for the sulfites in the sangria or for something else. Any other last questions? If not, I will say goodnight. I'm a little hungry anyway. So have a good night, and we'll have more great stuff tomorrow. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for sharing. And thank you very much for helping out. You are a great group. There is no question about that in my mind. You're a great group. I'm feeling the cohesion build, and that is wonderful. Good night, Susan. Have a great night. Steve, have a great night. Kay, have a great night. Everybody, have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow.